Good morning, everyone, and it is morning here, which means my teaching is over, which is quite exciting. I still have office hours to do, and I have loads of grading to do. My students still need to hand in their papers, and they had the exam last Friday, so I'll be busy, but I won't be waking up at 6:15 anymore to get to the university. Although my body isn't aware yet, so I wake up hours before my alarm, which is why I have my tiny eyes. I'm like, oh, it's not early, but for some reason I feel to wake up today. I want to talk, like, this is one of my rambling, maybe they're all rambling talks, but this specifically is one because I went to see Colette yesterday, the film with Keira Knightley, with a friend, and it was really good. It was really good. But it sort of opened something like in my head, some musing. So I'll just share that with you today. So there probably won't be any order in how I bring my thoughts across. If you bear with me, good for you. I like that. So Colette, I don't know if anyone knows the name Colette. She's a French writer, and she lived. Well, she was active like as a writer around the turn of the century. So the 1900s, the turn of that century. And she was so in France she's really popular as a writer. In the Netherlands, and as much, like, I have to admit, I never read anything by her. I just know her, so I have a degree in gender studies, so I know her as a feminist role model. Like, I know her as a person who paved the way for a lot of women to express their creativity. She didn't only write, she also did theater. So she's someone who broke a lot of gender roles by sort of fighting her way out of a strict society and doing whatever she wanted to do. So this is for me. So seeing that, and it's beautifully done. Like, the film is beautifully done. So if you can see it, I definitely recommend it. Because for me, it was a wonderful reminder of how far we've come as a people, but also as women. That, for example, so the story about Colette is that she started writing because she was married. She was married to someone who had ideas, but he hired other people to write them for him. So he wasn't. So he had a lot of ghostwriters, so to speak. And they were always like, he had trouble keeping money in his pocket. So he was always looking for other streams of revenue. And at one point he was like, why don't you write down your childhood stories, like the ones you always tell me? And it turns out that she's a pretty good, like, she's an excellent writer. So he guides her in that process. But of course his name or his brand is stamped on it. And at some point people who get to know her begin to understand, wait a second, that particular voice, like, that has to be your story. And he's becoming really scared that that some people find out, because that in that day and age, like, the idea that you let your wife write something that has your name on it. Of course, he didn't want to be found out that he couldn't actually write. He just had ideas. He just paid other people who could write to bring them, like, into the open. He didn't want that. Like, he didn't want his name dragged to the dirt, so to speak. But he was really afraid that she would, like, outgrow him and claim back her words. And that's, in the end, that's exactly what she did. Like, she divorced him. Spoiler, sorry. No, I mean, if you Google her, this is what her life was like. And she reclaimed her voice back. And she had, like, as I said, she was a gender bender. So she dated women as well as men. And she wrote about stuff like that. Like, she was she dared to address particular scandalous like sort of what's like simmering at the bottom of society. Like she was able to address that in a very beautiful way. Like it was still, I think it was still considered literature, but it's just like the topics that she touched upon were very daring, especially for women. So of course, it reminded me of the fact that we're only slightly over 100 years later, and we've gained so much freedom in the meantime. And not just women, just everyone who is not a white heterosexual male. And there's still like we still have some, like, we're not done yet. I wouldn't say that we live in an equal society, but we've come quite far. And of course, people like Colette, they helped us tremendously. And of course, and this actually reminded me of Virginia Woolf, who's another one of those. She did a lot for us as well, and I have her. It's a lovely edition. Of course, A Room. I don't know if you've read it, but A Room of One's Own. It's very small, like it's really tiny book. It's an essay, and basically, of course, the moral of this story is that. The reason why women haven't put out anything of worth yet in this. Of very few women, then of course there were women. She's pointing out that the women who do actually have the time and the money and the room, a room of their own, to sit down and let their creativity do its work. And she says, we've managed to keep women so busy with everything, like with being mothers, being keeping the household. Like we've been keeping women so busy that it's no wonder that only women who don't have that, so women from more upper class families, of course she's writing from England, that these are the women who have the time at their disposal to actually have a creative mind. Like they have that room in their brain for that. So this is what she's in this book, what she found. So she said women should have so much money a year and a room of their own, and then we'll show you that we can do the same, like that our work can have the same merit as men have. And of course, there's another wonderful thing is that today we know that women's writing can be as good as men, even though a lot of women still have and I think that's also an advice that they get, is that they put a name on the cover that is not necessarily male, but at least it doesn't denote gender. And of course, that's one of the things that we know, is that when it's neutral, when something is considered neutral, we often consider it masculine. And I can give 3 lectures on that if you want me to, and I've given lectures on that. But for example, J.K. Rowling, there is no K in Joanne Rowling, but her publisher thought it best to put J.K. Rowling on her books, because then you don't tell anyone whether the author is a woman or not. And of course, what we then often assume is that it's a man, because it might be 2019 in the meantime. The canon is still very much dominated by white men, of course. So yeah, we have this assumption that if the name isn't particularly female, then it's probably a man. So we still have the struggle. I still have the discussion with my clients, like, what name do I put on this? Like, should I just like go with initials? I would love for us to break that. I think that might be a glass ceiling in the literature world. So I would love for us to break that. But this is, and of course, like Virginia Woolf was already discussing that. So the reason I'm bringing that up is that things have changed, but the same patterns are still visible somewhat, even though we've come pretty far. We aren't done yet. Like we haven't conquered the entire field, so to speak. So just a piece that I wanted to read out from this book. So Virginia, if you just tuned in Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own, because it very much reminds me still of what we have. And this was supposed to be a short video, but that's what I do when I ramble. I don't know when to stop, and I have so much yet to say. So stay tuned. Okay, so here's so if you happen to have this lovely edition, it's on page 129. So she says here at the top of the page, so long as you write what you wish to write, that is all that matters. And whether it matters for ages or only for hours, nobody can say. But to sacrifice a hair of the head of your vision, a shade of its color, in deference to some headmaster with a silver pot in his hand, or to some professor with a measuring rod up his sleeve, is the most abject treasuring. And the sacrifice of wealth and chastity, which used to be said to be the greatest of human disasters, a mere flea bite in comparison. So what she's saying here, of course, so she laments the fact that that women don't have access to libraries, etc. She writes that in another, I think that's another essay. But of course, what we have these days is we have the gatekeepers, and of course, one of it were the gatekeepers that told Joanna Rowling, put JK on the cover, that will sell better. And of course, that's the great thing. So this day, and I know you know that I am very fond of self-publishing. This day, if we look at what Colette went through and what we have as available to us, is these days we don't have to compromise our visions anymore. Like we're outrunning the gatekeepers by telling them, well, I have the story to tell, and you tell me we can't sell it in bookstores or whatever. But let me show you something. I mean, for me, that's very much the spirit of self-publishing, is that we're like, let's see, like I'll take this risk. Like I'll take this. If I think this is a good story, I'm not gonna beg for an agent or for a contract with a publisher. I'm just gonna do this myself and see who's right in the end. And that is like for me, when I speak of self-publishing, that's how I see that world. It's like it has given us the opportunity to prove that readers are much more much more variety than the gatekeepers tell us. And when I say gatekeepers, I mean the agents and the publishers, of course. And of course, and this is a completely different topic, and I've talked about that before. Within self-publishing, rules have started to come to the surface, unwritten rules, like don't do this, do this. I'm not a fan of that, as you know. If you want to take that risk, take that risk. It's your story, it's your voice. Like Virginia Woolf says, don't compromise that. If you write niche, be prepared that you might not be able to live off that. But if that is what feeds your soul, just do it and find a day job, maybe part-time, that's not that bad, so you can do both. Like you don't have to compromise your vision. You get to say what you have to say, but you might, like, there's a sacrifice there that you might have to have, like that part-time job, or maybe I talked about this before, maybe you partly write the stuff that feeds your soul, or maybe partly you write something to market, whatever you need to make that living and to keep your room of your own. So yeah, so to make a bridge to what I wanted to, what the musings that came to that how am I going to make this bridge? What I was wondering about after seeing Colette and after thinking of Virginia Woolf is whether these days, because we no longer live in a world where nothing is possible. Like everything is possible these days. Like if you, even though these rules are coming up in the self-publishing arena, you don't have to listen to them. You can still do it. You can still put your book out. And if you're good at writing, if you're good at marketing, you will get some results. Like it's something you can figure out for yourself. So that made me wonder whether if you look at Colette and people like Virginia Woolf, what these women went through, a lot of that was external struggle. Just not being invited in particular areas, public spaces, because of being a woman. And these days, of course, we don't have that anymore. Like, we can do whatever we want. It might come with a little risk, like putting a woman's name on a cover when you're writing fantasy, for example. Just stick with the J.K. Rowling example. I think that comes with a risk. I think it's worth taking the risk. If we want to change these structures, we need to make people see that women can write excellent, absolutely excellent book with merit, as Virginia Woolf would say. So it made me wonder whether these days what keeps us from writing is mostly internal. Because these days, absolutely, there is nothing is keeping us back. Like, we can make excuses. My kids need attention, my partner needs attention, my job needs attention. We might not have that room of our own. We might not have the money to to sit down as many hours as Virginia Woolf would have you, to let that creativity, the juices pulse through your veins. Like, we might not have that, but we make choices. We don't have to turn on the television and watch Netflix for 2 hours after work. We don't. We can do something else. So that is what made me wonder whether I know so many people who feel stuck writing. They feel there are obstacles they don't know how to overcome. And it just made me wonder, and so this is not a question I have an answer to, but I'm just wondering to what extent these struggles are just internal, or are there still, I also know that the fight hasn't been won yet. Like, we haven't been fully emancipated, to use a word that a lot of people don't really enjoy hearing. So what is it? Is it mostly an internal struggle? Are there still external structures that we're fighting? Is that what's keeping us back, or is it really the mindset that we have? Is it the mindset that we are not supposed to take time for ourselves? Going back again to Virginia Woolf, is it, especially for women writers, is it because we don't feel that we have the right to claim a room in our own houses and say, this is now my space, and when the door is locked, I don't want my partner to come in. I don't want my kids, if you have kids, to come knocking on the door. This is my space. I think that is one of the struggles that I hear most by women. So we're not used to claim that space. And Virginia Woolf was already struggling with that, and I think we're still struggling with that. But if we look at the publishing world, there is nothing keeping us back anymore. So maybe it's time to sit down and figure out, okay, so why are we not writing now then? Like, it's 2019. What is keeping us back still? Just something to reflect upon this year and see how far we're getting further. Like, we're doing great. So let's see where we are in 2020. That's just, as I said, it was complete rambling, but sometimes I just have to share what's going on in this head of mine. Have a good week. Anything I need you to know? Yes, I'm doing something new this year. I used to do interviews on my blog, where I interview people about products they had out that were useful for writers, like planners or courses or worksheets or what have you. What I'm going to do this year, I'm going to change that up. I'll be doing a Facebook Live every month at the end of the month with a writer, and we will talk about their struggles. So I'll interview them about their struggles and how they are trying to overcome them, how they overcame them, wherever they are in that process. And so we'll be having honest conversations about the writing process. That is the idea, and I'm curious. I don't know. Technologically, I hope I'll figure that out, how to do a Facebook Live. Should be really easy. But I'm really looking, the first interview will be with Sherry McCarthy from the Creative Mermaids. Google her, she's fabulous. I'll also tag her in this post. So hopefully see you there. I'll link to the event beneath the video. But I'll be doing this this year and see how it works, see if it's useful for you. Okay. Have a great week, everyone. Bye bye. Thank you for listening.